Welcome back. Welcome back. We're just busting it through this first hour here. My buddy Scott Lebedo coming up in just a minute, taking a look in on the markets in some tumultuous territory here right now at 26,200. As I've been telling you for the past few weeks, when the stock market breaks through these big round numbers and closes below them, it causes some programmatic things. And I think, below 25 is a bad sign. 22 is really where the trap door is. So any bad news, any states closing, somebody, unfortunately Herman Cain died today. It's alleged that he was at a rally in Tulsa and 3 weeks later he's dead. So all of these things contribute to uncertainty in the markets. And I still feel like with all the artificial insemination the government has put into this market with printing digital cash that doesn't really exist, the market needs to clean out all of that artificial insemination, and I think there could be a clean out to as low as 18,000. But speaking of the Fed, expanding its balance sheet to $8 trillion or something like right now, one of the foremost experts in the world on the Fed joins us right now. Graham Summers joins us for the first time. He's the chief marketing strategist of Phoenix Capital Research. Fed met yesterday. I didn't see anything to the layman. I'm not a Fed expert like you are. I didn't see anything outrageous there. Break it down for us what you see happening there, and we got a few other things to cover too, Graham.
Well, I really like the word you used there, outrageous, because for something to be outrageous, it needs to be not ordinary. But we're in such an extraordinary time this year with Fed policy that the Fed really has to do something ridiculous for it to seem strange at this point. So as a little perspective, in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, which we often refer to as the worst crisis in 80 years, the Fed kept interest rates at zero for 8 years and spent about $3 trillion in quantitative easing. Well, the Fed just spent more than $3 trillion between April and June of this year alone. And besides that, yesterday in the meeting, the reason the markets popped on the news was because Fed Chair Jerome Powell essentially told the market, we are planning to keep doing what we're doing now, which is these kind of crisis level extraordinary measures until there's a full recovery. And the Fed's previously said they believe a full recovery is not coming till the end of 2021, maybe early 2022. So breaking it down in simple terms, what the Fed basically said was, we're going to provide about $125 billion in liquidity every single month until the economy's back where it was prior to COVID. And that's basically the Fed saying we're backstopping just everything. And that's why stocks went up.
And I don't know, if you heard some of my prognosis on this stuff, but, my background is I've been a short seller for 30 years. So I kind of look at charts the opposite way of other people.
Yes.
And I see this whole run up, to me, it's all caused by the stimulus. It's all caused by this artificial liquidity that the government keeps printing. And I think it's the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. And at some point it's going to break, and it's going to break bad. And I think that's why we see assets like gold and also Bitcoin moving up, because at least there's a finite, a known supply as a commodity in it. And I think people are having a flight to, these traditional things like gold. What do you see happening with gold?
So gold hit a new all-time high just a few days ago. And you're absolutely right. Gold is actually very problematic for the Fed. Most Americans, when they hear about gold, it immediately ignites the thought of inflation in their minds. And historically, prices have basically gone up almost nonstop since the early 70s when we first broke away from the gold standard. But things like education, housing, food, they happen so gradually, and the media never really lashes onto it as an inflationary measure. Gold's different. When gold begins to spike, it catches people's attention. It becomes problematic as an inflation gauge. So the Fed's very concerned, I think, with what gold's doing, because gold's essentially calling the Fed's bluff, which is that the Fed seems to believe that it can somehow cause economic growth by printing all this digital money without igniting inflation. So the real question is, what's different between now and 2008? Because in 2008, the Fed did similarly crazy things, but we didn't get this inflationary spike, and gold didn't do what it's doing today. Well, the difference is, at that time, the Fed was essentially giving handouts to Wall Street, and Wall Street would take that money and put it into stocks, put it into other things. This time around, money is actually going straight into the economy in the form of these stimulus payments. The the government's doing. And the Fed's also doing Main Street lending. So instead of the money just staying on bank balance sheets and being used by institutional investors to leverage up their stock holdings, this time around, money's actually going into the economy, which is why inflation is starting to take off. And that's why gold's igniting like it is. And the second component to that is that we're in a time of tremendous political instability, and gold is typically a fear gauge as well. Whenever you start to see riots, whenever you start to see civil unrest and these sorts of things happening, people tend to move towards gold because it's a safe haven asset.
So I don't know if you follow cryptocurrency at all.
A little bit, yeah, of course.
I was one of the founding team of Overstock's T0 division, which was the first company in the world to accept, in the U.S., to accept Bitcoin, and I kind of got involved in this stuff in 2014.
Right.
And Bitcoin they give out a bounty for people who confirm transactions on the network, right? They just cut that fee in half. And what that does is it actually starts to limit the supply. So as our government is diluting the dollar's down 8.8%, and it's like the biggest drop in history, I think, or close to it. Bitcoin is actually getting less dilution to people out there. So I think more and more people are getting adoption on that. In our final 2 minutes here, tell me why Trump is a lock to win the re-election in your view.
I think culturally this country has become so divided, and that the consequence of being pro-Trump publicly is so dramatic. I mean, we're seeing teachers and people being fired for just making social media posts now. That the reality is, and this is the dirty secret that the Beltway doesn't like to talk about, is that most of the polls are just total garbage. Why is that? Well, first of all, they're mostly done on landlines, and the response rate is 9%. So they call 100 people, tops 9 will answer. And then on top of that, people are naturally suspicious of explaining their political views at this time because we're in such a divisive and antagonistic environment. Why would I tell a total stranger, hi, yes, I'm going to vote for Trump. Yes, I think he's great. When I don't even know this person, they could go publish that publicly and I get fired, lose my job, or worse. So I think the reality is the shy Trump voter is going to be a very powerful force this time around. I combine that with Joe Biden being I guess you could say not particularly popular. I mean, the best thing he's got going for him for Democrats is that he's, quote, not Trump. There's not a whole lot of enthusiasm around him.
Yeah, there's a poll out there that the mainstream media and the loons on the left are not really publicizing a lot. But I think 60% of the people who said they're voting for Joe Biden, when asked why, because he isn't Trump. There's no enthusiasm
exactly right.
for him. They just it's anybody but Trump to many of these people. And to me, a lot of this lockdown stuff and this Antifa hijacking, peaceful protests and stuff is really because the fear in the Dems' eyes is that Trump was making good gains with the African-American community, and they're trying to slow that down too. Graham, we got to leave it there. I really appreciate you. Maybe we got to hook something up where you join us every week or two and give us a little update on what's happening with the Fed.
I'd like that. Take care now.
All right, thank you. That's Graham Summers, Chief Marketing Officer of PhoenixCapitalResearch.com. We're going to take a quick break right here. We're going to come back with my buddy, conservative artist, and the man at war with Bill de Blasio. Scott Lebedo is going to be here next.